Good afternoon, and thank you for coming. Today's author series is sponsored by the White Fund. We would like to thank the White Fund trustees for their generosity in sponsoring today's events. We want to note that our Irish Heritage events are partially funded by a grant from the Lawrence Cultural Council. We'd like to thank them for their support. Our sincere thanks to the Lawrence Heritage State Park for hosting our exhibit, 1916, a year that changed Irish history, and to the Lawrence Community Access Television for videotaping today's lecture as well. We are hopeful that you will attend many of the upcoming events during Irish Heritage Month as we celebrate our great city and Irish culture at its best. It's now my pleasure to introduce to you Amelia Kiley from the White Fund, who will introduce our speaker. Amelia.
Can't quite see. Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Amita Kiley, and I'm a trustee of the White Fund. I'm here today with my fellow trustee, Jay Dowd. The White Fund is a charitable trust established in 1852 by the Honorable Daniel Appleton White to benefit the citizens of Lawrence, Mass. One aspect of the White Fund is to host a series of lectures that enlighten the mind and elevate the character. Judge White's chief concern was for the advancement and success in life of young men and women of Lawrence. Over the years at these lectures, Laurentians listened to the likes of Ralph Waldo Emerson, Oliver Wendell Holmes, and Robert Frost. And there's a copy of the program listing Robert Frost's lecture here, and the original is at the Lawrence Public Library. More recently, Denise Froman, Martin Espada, and Junot Diaz shared their poetic works with us. National Book Award winner Elizabeth Acevedo and the internationally acclaimed Julia Alvarez spoke to our young people as well. The White Fund trustees guard this tradition proudly. We are happy to partner with the Reverend James T. O'Reilly, OSA, Division 8, Ancient Order of the Hibernians, to bring you the next in a long line of distinguished speakers, Jack Cashman. Jack Cashman's career has put him in a number of roles, although the title of author is a relatively new one. Coming from a background of small business ownership, real estate, and insurance, Cashman was first elected to serve in the Maine House of Representatives in 1982. After 5 terms in office and some time away from state government, he returned to public service in 2003 in a variety of roles with the administration of Maine Governor John Baldacci. Cashman's first book, An Irish Immigrant Story, was published in 2018 as a historical novel based on the story of his own family's journey from Ireland to the United States during the time of the potato famine. Today, Jack will discuss his latest book, An Irishman's Story of Survival, which was just published last month. In this book, Kevin O'Donnell, the main character, resolves to carve out his niche, to transcend the barriers that life hurls his way, and to grasp the reins of a fulfilling existence. Cashman's unique background of business owner, elected office holder, and government official, combined with his creative mind, bring together a collection of stories unlike any author working today. Jack has spent nearly all of his life in Maine and currently lives in Hampton with his wife, Betty. They are the proud parents of 2 sons and grandparents of 5 granddaughters. Welcome, Mr. Cashman.
I may have to jack this up a little bit. Can everybody hear me? This doesn't seem to be working. Where's my technician guy? Oh, I see. So I just got to talk loud. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I'll do my best to speak loud enough so you can hear me up in the back. I tell you, I'm glad to be back here. I was here last year to talk about a book, and I'm glad to be back. I tell you what I'm going to do. Is this all right?
You can do that if you want. Yeah, you want to move around. Okay. The best. If I do that, I would.
No good?
No, that's perfect.
Okay. I was here last year to talk about my first book, which was an Irish immigrant story, and I have copies of that here too. But I started with an Irish book, and I guess my latest one is also a book with Irish roots. So I talked to Bill Sullivan and asked him if he would like to have me come back, and he was kind enough to have me come back. I was actually born in Salem, Massachusetts, so I do have Massachusetts roots. I was brought up in a town called Old Town up in Maine, and it was like Lawrence, a manufacturing town. We had textiles, we had shoe factories. It's most famous for canoes, and you've probably all heard of Old Town canoes. I actually used to make those when I was going to college. I worked at the canoe factory. They've changed a lot since I made them. They were made with fiberglass back in those days, but not anymore. But Old Town was a similar community to Lawrence, smaller, but similar in the sense that it was a manufacturing town. But I came today because I've published my 5th novel, which is An Irishman's Story of Survival. And I want to talk to you a bit about what inspired me to write it. All of my books are historical novels, and what I try to do is take historical facts, I research them for accuracy to make sure that my accounts in the book are accurate, and then I blend in fictional characters. And just as a little humor from myself personally, if you remember Stephen King, when he first started putting out movies, he'd always put a little part in there for himself. And so I take a little bit of pleasure in using family names. Kevin O'Donnell is actually my cousin, so that's the original name in the book of the main character. Now, I have to tell you, he gets in some trouble with the law, and he has to change his name. And his name at the end is David Cashin, C-A-S-H-I-N, not Cashman. But I had an ancestor, David Cashman, and I'll get more into that when I get into the book. I got a fun fact for you, though, and I just found this out. Years ago, I was reading an article about Muhammad Ali, Cassius Clay, was checking on his ancestral roots. Come to find out, and you can check this if you don't believe me, he has an ancestor, or had an ancestor, from Clare County named Grady. My mother's name was Grady, so I started telling people I think I'm related to Muhammad Ali, but nobody believed me. But he had Irish roots. Now, I already knew that 3 of the Beatles had Irish roots. I just found out that Ted Williams's great-grandparents were both Irish from Cork. So that just gives me proof positive that everything great in this world has Irish roots. So that's a fun fact for you. Even this group, that's right. Anyway, the first historical fact that I cover in this book is the Great Hunger in Ireland. And I'm not telling anybody in this room anything they don't already know, but the Great Hunger in Ireland was not a famine. There was plenty of food. It was just that the Irish peasants were not given access to it. So it was a tragic event, and let me read from the book, actually. I'm getting old now, so if I'm going to read, I got to put these on. By the way, I noticed given my background that it was mentioned I was first elected to the Maine legislature in 1982. I think that tells you how old I am. But Ireland's great hunger brought on by the European potato blight was one of history's great tragedies. Poor tenant farmers were driven from their homes and left to starve. The death toll from starvation and related diseases reached 1.5 million people. An equal number fled the country to avoid that fate. The voyages across the Atlantic were often perilous, with a good percentage of passengers dying on board. These events are all too real and all too tragic. The events took place when Ireland was ruled by Britain, and the lack of humanitarian response from Westminster exacerbated a horrible situation. The starving native Irish received more aid from the distant shores of America than from their ruling class neighbor across the Irish Sea. They actually received more aid from a tribe of Native Americans, the Choctaw Indians, than they did from their British rulers. The British, thinking quickly, decided that they could turn this to their advantage by evicting the Irish peasants from their humble cottages and mud huts, tearing them down, and using the ground to raise cattle, which was a much more profitable venture than raising vegetables. So that's what they did. They threw the Irish peasants out of their homes, put them in the streets to starve. And as I read accounts of the Great Hunger, the thing that depressed me the most were the accounts of the docile nature in which Irish peasants accepted their fate. They were so beaten down in body and spirit that they accepted the fate that was thrust upon them during the Great Hunger. But I knew there were people, or Irish people, who didn't accept their fate. Let me read. This is a passage from, not from this book, but from another book I'm working on that I came across. It really inspired the book that I'm going to talk about today. In justifying Britain justifying their actions during the Great Hunger, they blamed everything on the lazy dependence of the Irish peasants on British handouts, interestingly enough. So let me read this. The fact that these starving peasants had for years been forced to live solely on the potatoes they could grow on their tiny plots of land as the Crown deliberately crippled the Irish economy was conveniently lost in their explanation that the native Irish people had exacerbated what was an act of God, and the British government had done all they could within the bounds of fiscal prudence to help ameliorate the situation. Nonetheless, some twisted clerics in Britain, Ireland, and the U.S. even attributed the situation to, quote, a mysterious visitation of God's providence. A fiery response of this ridiculous claim from Archbishop Hughes of New York, himself a native Irishman, woke up America to the real cause. He called the claim of a visitation of God's providence blasphemy. Hughes made his proclamation to an audience of key opinion makers in a public forum in New York in 1848. No, God's famine is known for the general scarcity of food, of which it is the consequence. There is no general scarcity here. There has been no general scarcity of food in Ireland, either present or in the past, except in one species of vegetable. The soil has produced its usual tribute for the support of those by whom it has been cultivated. But the political economy found the Irish people too poor to pay for the harvest of their own labors. It has been exported to a better market. He goes on to explain how the Celtic population was beaten down so badly that they accepted their fate. What admirable resignation! They fall down through weakness at the threshold of the warehouses where the food is kept, without having even attempted to burst a door or break a window. Reading that passage, I thought, I have to write a book about someone who maintained that fighting independent spirit that the Irish are famous for in America. You know, it's easy when you sit in the comfort of this country to imagine if I had been there then, thrown out of my house by British constabulary, I would have reacted differently. It's easy to picture that now as we sit here. If we had lived in that era, in that country, beaten as they were, I doubt many of us would have acted any differently, but there were Irish that did. And again, let me read from the book. Wrong book. This passage is when the O'Donnell family was being evicted from their home. I got to keep the mic up here. The constabulary came and read from a scroll, a very official scroll, to inform the O'Donnell family that they were being evicted. The father of the family, Daniel, did not know how to respond to the eviction. Finally, after a long, awkward silence, one of the constables spoke. "Well, out with it, man. Have you no response?" The father still had no response. But a voice from the background said, "I have a response." It was his son, Kevin. As he pushed past his father, he took 2 strides toward the 4 intruders, and then, with surprising speed of hand, punched the constable who had spoken square in the face. The reaction from the other 3 was momentary shock, followed by a 3-person race to subdue the attacker, who threw a second punch at his prey. Kevin was quickly wrestled to the ground by 2 men, while Stark, who is the paid man for the estate, held on to Kevin's father to keep him away, even though he was still too bewildered to be of any help to his son. It's tough to turn these pages while I hold this mic, I'm sorry. The constable who had been punched proceeded to return the favor while Kevin was being restrained by 2 men. Throwing a right hand at Kevin's head, he proceeded to take his revenge. This brought about a second surprise as Kevin's sister, Deirdre, emerged from the house with a broom handle and proceeded to beat the punching constable over the head. This successfully stopped the punching after 2 or 3 blows, but she was quickly pushed to the ground by Stark's man, who wrestled her weapon away from her as the 4 intruders regained control. The brother and sister, who were ages 15 and 13, were arrested on the spot, handcuffed, taken away by the constable. I won't give you a spoiler alert as to where the story goes from there, but I read that passage just to demonstrate the inspiration for the book was to show, again, that fighting spirit that the Irish are famous for. And it was still present with many of those who were evicted from their homes. The majority of people perhaps took it with a lot quieter than Kevin and his sister. But I wanted to demonstrate that there were people of a different fabric. So I wrote this book. And the main character, Kevin O'Donnell, is going to face many obstacles, not just in Ireland, but when he comes to America, of course, he was as welcome as your own ancestors and my ancestors were, which was not very welcomed. He overcame a lot of things. Kevin O'Donnell is a beacon of such indomitable spirit, grappling with his life's relentless waves that seek to subdue him. In the turbulent era of the mid-20th century, the world could be a harsh, unforgiving place for a young Irish lad. Yet within Kevin lies a burning desire to carve out his niche, to transcend the barriers that life hurls his way and grasp the reins of a fulfilling existence. His trials begin with the voyage over the Atlantic, not the only Irishman to face that fate. He survives it. He lands and he gets involved in what would be the second area of historical relevance in the story. I talk a lot about shipbuilding in New England. It was a very prominent industry at the time, leading up to the Civil War. And 2 key areas that I cover are Southwest Harbor, Maine, which is part of Acadia National Park, or it's in that vicinity if you ever go up to Acadia, and Essex, Massachusetts, 2 areas that were famous for shipbuilding back then, and still are, actually. If you've ever heard of Hinckley boats, they're manufactured in Southwest Harbor, Maine. So I give a lot of history of shipbuilding in New England, and then I move into the Civil War. My ancestor, David Cashman, who I mentioned earlier, he fought in the Civil War, and he fought with the Massachusetts 9th. Anybody familiar with the Massachusetts 9th Regiment? Fought in the Civil War. It was made up entirely of Irish immigrants. And my ancestor, David Cashman, came over in 1858, and he joined the Massachusetts 9th and fought in the Civil War. My main character, David Cashman, also fights in the Civil War. The battles that I delineate in the book, I researched, and the facts are accurate as to the activities of the Massachusetts 109th. I have, my ancestor was wounded at Gettysburg. We talked earlier about Gettysburg and Chamberlain from Brewer, Maine, who was a hero at Gettysburg. David Cashman wasn't a hero at Gettysburg, but he was wounded there. So there's a lot of history in here of the Civil War. There's a lot of history of boat building in New England, and there's a lot of history about the Great Hunger in Ireland and the voyages by ship to get you out of Ireland at the time. My main character has a fighting spirit I think you'll find that you can take pride in. And he certainly wasn't alone in Irish history. I just walked through your gallery in the back, and there's a whole host of Irish folks in there who demonstrated that spirit in the Easter Uprising and subsequent events. So again, the whole genesis of the book was to put a character forward who demonstrates what we all feel. Having said all of that, I will take questions. I brought copies of the book. If you would care to purchase one, I'm glad to sign it for you. I also have an Irish immigrant story. If you haven't read that yet or you haven't got it, I've got copies of that. And I also brought this book. This is American Valor. It's not Irish, but it's a story of an Aroostook County, Maine family. If you're familiar with Maine at all, you know Aroostook County. It's not the end of the world, but you can see it from there. It's an Aroostook County family who has a farm, and two of the sons go to fight in World War I. So there's a lot of history in this book about World War I and World War II, and the city of Bangor. If you've ever been up to Bangor, Maine, one of the boys comes back from World War I and joins the Bangor Police Force. So again, I encourage you to read all my books, obviously, but I came today specifically to talk about this one. So if you have any questions, I'm glad to try to answer them. Come on, I didn't do too good a job that you don't have any questions. Come on. No questions? Yes, ma'am.
I'm wondering if the Lawrence Public Library has copies of your books.
Lawrence?
Public Library.
They can order them. That's up to the library. Whenever I publish a book, I give a copy to the Hamden Library, the Bangor Library, the Brewer Library, and the Old Town Library. I don't get down to Lawrence, but they can certainly order one.
I'll look it up, but
My wife was a librarian for 30 years, so I try to take care of the libraries. There you go.
And we have a rather significant Irish collection in the Lawrence Public Library.
Oh, great. I'd be honored to have my books in there.
There should be.
I would be honored if they were.
And my maiden name is Brady. County Cavan. He left in 1820 before all the mess happened.
Yeah.
The fact that I have a photograph of this man and his wife, who was born in 1798, is really something special to me.
Sure.
And the one time we went to Ireland, I had to take my New York City husband through Ireland to County Cavan to see where they all came from.
Is he Irish, your husband?
Not really. He's from Europe.
No, I married a very nice French lady
Yes.
in Old Town.
People from other countries.
Yeah, we can't all be Irish. We all want to be. My grandfather, Henry Francis Grady, and you don't get more Irish than that, I guess, he always used to tell me there's only two kinds of people, the Irish and the ones that want to be.
His name is Barney Brady. Does that sound Irish?
Not bad. He could fake it. Any other questions? So, yes, ma'am.
Is this people based? Where is the family based?
Yep, they're right outside of Cork City in County Cork. And he leaves after he gets himself in trouble, he and his sister leave from Cove Harbor, which is where most of our ancestors left from, which is also in County Cork. The Cashmans are a Cork name. My mother's family, the Grady's, came from Kilkenny. But Cashman, if you ever go to Ireland, I've been over so many times I could be a tour guide, but Cashman is a Cork name. If you get outside Cork, you don't hear it much. It's pretty much centered in Cork. Am I related to him? Probably not. Kennedys were over on the east coast in Wexford, right? Probably not. My ancestors were not wealthy. My ancestor Cashman that came over, his papers identify him as a laborer. Same with my ancestor Grady. However, my great-grandfather Cashman was on the Board of Aldermen in Salem, ran a business on Derby Street, which, if you've ever been to Salem, Derby Street's the Irish section. Nathaniel Hawthorne's home is on Derby Street. He had a store with his brother on the corner and served as an alderman. His son, John, my grandfather, was a postmaster, and my grandfather, Grady, was fire chief in Salem. So they came from humble beginnings, but they did well. As I'm sure most of your ancestors can tell the same story.
Each generation has done better.
Yes, yes.
But did they go to Maine? Or where did they come to?
No, they went to Salem, Mass, and both families. My father was a Woolworth manager, and they transferred him to Old Town to open the Old Town store. And he ended up opening a restaurant. I have 4 sisters and a brother, and we all worked in the restaurant. I mean, that's the way restaurants were back in the day. Only big families had them because child labor was cheap. But we ended up staying in Old Town. My father was on the Old Town City Council. I went on after him. My brother went on after me. And you heard about my legislative experience and so forth. My 2 sons graduated from Old Town High School. My son Derek is here with me today. And he lives in Brewer now, where Chamberlain comes from. But
Would you ever, Portland, Maine is where my Kennedy family ended up. Has anybody ever done a book about the Irish in Portland?
yes, I didn't, but yes, there has been one done, and don't ask me the title. But my friend and attorney, Jerry Conley, who's also Irish, has shown me there is a book about the Portland Irish. I don't know if it was something just done locally for the library or if it was published. I couldn't tell you that, but there has been a book done. There are a lot of Irish in Portland, a lot of Irish in Bangor. Those would be the 2 Irish centers in Maine, Bangor and Portland. Other questions? I'm actually going to be giving this same talk at the Irish Heritage Center in Portland on the 24th. And then later at the Irish Cultural Center in Canton. Any other questions? Yes, Bill.
In your book, the individual goes to work and fighting the Civil War.
Yes.
How does he make out during the war? I assume he survives. Does he go back to Maine? How does that work?
No, I can't tell you. He survives.
Okay.
And life goes on for him. But before I don't want to give you too much, but nobody will buy it. But before he goes to fight in the Civil War, he has another incident that causes him another hurdle to get over. I'll leave it at that. That's how he ends up in the Civil War, but he does survive it, and life gets better for him after.
So he truly was a survivor.
He was a survivor. He survived, well, you'll read the book, he survived more hurdles than any of us should ever have to go through. But it was a tough time back in those days, you know. Like I said earlier, you'd like to think if I had been there when this happened, I'd have reacted like he did. But I don't know. You've been beaten down for so long, you don't have the spirit anymore. The landowners in Ireland who had been transported in, if you're going to classify meanness, the majority of those landowners were very cruel to the Irish. They saw them as servants to increase their profits. Most of the produce and the cattle and the sheep and everything went over to England for profit. And the Irish were there, the Irish peasants, the Celts, were there simply to help turn a profit. So how cruel is that? It was accepted at the time as normal. But we even find today that things are accepted as normal that sometimes baffle us. So.
Now, did they always have the land?
Oh, you're going back to Cromwell's days when, yeah, they had it for centuries, and they found it.
They took it?
Took it. They took it. Yeah, they took it. It was the entire British reaction to the Great Hunger was nothing short of genocide. They saw it as a way to get rid of the Irish.
Wow.
They were a good bunch. Thank God they had the Beatles. That had nothing good come out of that country. Yes.
My impression from Irish history and what I know about it is that it's a country that reads and writes a lot. And it's unusual for a very Catholic country to do that, in my impression. That's not being exclusive, but I think it's the interest in literature and writing that sort of fascinates me. And the writers that have come out of it, including yourself.
The Irish people are tremendously creative, and I don't just say that because I'm Irish. Creative people, in my opinion, creative people make life better for all the rest of us. Whether they're creative in terms of writing books, writing poetry, writing music, sculpting, painting, whatever the art form that they're in, they make our life better. And the Irish people, I mean, if you go over there and you sit in a pub and they'll break into song. I mean, if you did it in this country, they'd probably throw you out of the bar, right? What is this guy, drunk? Get him out of here. But over there, somebody will break into song and everybody listens. Everybody's quiet because it seems like they can all sing. It's a very entertaining country because they are such creative, entertaining people. And they're very warm people, and they welcome you, especially if you have an Irish name. I don't know how many times you hear it. They'll say, "What's your name?" "Jack Cashman." "Welcome home." How does that make you feel when you're in a foreign country? Welcome home. Makes you feel pretty good, right? But
Is Dublin under control now?
thanks to George Mitchell, fighting has pretty much ceased in the north. But, frankly, this book has a lot of history of the revolution and the way we ended up with the 6 counties. And it can't last forever. It can't. 26 plus 6 equals 1.
But is Dublin like any of our big cities?
Yes, too much like our big cities. I go to Ireland, I stay on the West Coast because it's country. It's country people. And we had a developer, real estate developer in Bangor when I was growing up, Sid Epstein. He lived to be 100 years old. I love the guy. He was great to talk to. But he always used to tell me, "Jack, up here we're all farmers. Up in Maine, we're all just farmers. When we get down to the big city, we get schnookered easy because we don't know what we're talking about." That may be true, but I stay on the West Coast because I like those farmers. But, yeah, Dublin. I walked out of a hotel, my brother and I, on O'Connell Street. I looked this way, and I saw the Colonel Sanders. Looked this way, Golden Arches. And I put my hand up like this. I said, David, we might as well be in Boston. You know, I like it better on the West Coast. Not then, no. I didn't see any Dunkin' Donuts. Give it time. They'll be there. Any others? If not, again, I thank Bill. Thank you for having me here. And I thank you folks for coming and for having me here. It's my second trip here. Who knows, I may write another Irish book and give you a call and come back. But I enjoy coming here, and I enjoy you folks. And anytime you get a chance to talk to a group of Irish people, it's a big plus. So thank you very much.
I'm going to say a few words. Well, Jack, my voice is down because last night at our dinner dance, there was no microphone. So I was talking very loud. So today you people unfortunately are having the whatever as a result of that. We want to thank you, Jack, for coming. We want to thank the White Fund again for sponsoring today's events. Next Sunday, we have an event the White Fund is also sponsoring again. It's a book on the story of Sergeant Alvin York and the other 16. One of those 16 came from Lawrence, Massachusetts. His name was Patrick Donahue. And Patrick's family, many of them lived right in this area. One of them is Patricia Waters, who worked in the City Hall for many years. So it should be a very interesting talk. Mr. Gregory, who wrote the book, is from, he's actually from Oklahoma originally, but now he lives in New Orleans. Unfortunately, he has to work on Monday, so there's no way he could be with us physically next week, but it'll be by Zoom, and you'll be able to ask questions. Our webmaster has been here to look over everything. So please come and enjoy, have refreshments, talk to Mr. Cashman, and we hope to see you again next Sunday. And I want to mention one other thing. Jack Leahy, our chairman of the luncheon, is here if anyone wants any tickets for the 15th of March. It should be a great event. Last night, as I said, we had over 200 people. We had over 100 people on Friday at the flag raising, and this is a full house. So we're doing a great job, so let's keep it that way. Take care, have a great day, and be safe. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd just say one last thing. I have books here for sale, and like I said, if you wanted to pick one up, I'm glad to sign it for you. For those of you who prefer audio books, it is coming out in audio in another month, just so you know.